Kia ora e te whānau. It's Pamela Bell. I'm the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Institute of Building, your institute. So, hey, we are here today for a pretty exciting inaugural Industry Insights. This is our interactive webinar where we bring international guests to you. And this is where we invert what the typical webinar or seminar experience is like. So we put the questions up front. That means you get more interaction. And it also means that we get to get your questions answered. So let's get rolling. First of all, you'll want to be connected into Slido. You can see the code there, 2495589. And we'll be recording this Industry Insights session, and it will land up on YouTube, and we'll advise you about that as well. Now, today, our international expert is Amy Marks, and we're going to be welcoming Amy in from where it's snowing in Clinton, New Jersey, on the east coast of the States. But before we do that, we just want a little service announcement, if you like. Hopefully, most of you will heard about Building Our Digital Community. This is our conference coming up in 2023 on the 23rd of March, and that'll be hosted in Wellington at Te Papa. And we will be hearing from a range of international and national experts, including Amy Marks, who will be headlining for us. So let's bring in Amy Marks. Amy, give us a little introduction about yourself. Oh, before you do, I just want to say that I was just chatting with Amy, and we realized that we first met maybe a decade ago. And 8 years ago, we brought Amy out when I was Chief Executive at Prefab NZ for what's called the CoLab event. And we learned that Amy is a bit of a rugby fan. So Amy, please tell us more about yourself.
Sure. I am Amy Marks. I'm the Vice President of Industrialized Construction at Autodesk now. And I am a huge Black Ferns fan. So I have to give a special shout out to John Williams from Becca, who we're doing a little bit of a jersey trade when I come down there. So thanks. I'm a Portia Woodman fanatic, so I appreciated this jersey and like no other. So yes, I work at Autodesk, and I am lucky enough to travel the world and work with our customers about their transformation regarding things like convergence of construction and manufacturing and sustainability, and really helping people transform their businesses.
Awesome. So because we're on this inverted program, we're going to jump straight into the good stuff. So we have a bunch of questions in Slido, and before we jump into those, we want people to be asking questions as we talk through some of these things. So we've preloaded 5 questions or areas that we want to check in with Amy on. This first one is around industrialized construction. So tell us, Amy, I mean, in New Zealand, we talk about prefab, offsite. In the UK, we talk about modern methods of construction. I think sometimes people talk about modular. Can you tell us, where do you sit in the industrialized construction space? What are you trying to put out into the world about industrialized construction?
I mean, I definitely think part of our issue is that there's a million different terms for this. Even in Singapore, they're saying PPVC versus modular versus, offsite. There's a million terms, some of which I'm somewhat responsible for, unfortunately, and some that I, still love. But I feel like industrialized construction, which again, may even evolve into something else, but I feel that we need to think about the application of manufacturing techniques to our entirety of our built environment, everything from conceptualization to our owner requirements, all the way through commissioning and digital twins and back around. So I think it's really more about technology and process enablers, like inclusive in that of IoT and predictive manufacturing, and of course, building information modeling and manufacturing informed design. But yes, then there's the physical piece parts that most people love to talk about, like a module or, a multi-trade rack or a multi-trade assembly, single trades. I think we have to really start thinking of bigger and incorporating advanced building methodologies with robotics and automation and, additive manufacturing, 3D printing. All of that is applying known manufacturing techniques to this environment.
Awesome. Can you tell us about how you're seeing robotics used in construction in North America or any of the other places you're visiting?
I think, first of all, we have an amazing tech center at Autodesk. So I get to see sort of a lot of the cutting edge at any one of our tech centers with our residents there. But I'm seeing a lot of people testing out things like exoskeletons, or even, we've all seen the robot dogs, but we're seeing a lot of things inside of factories where people, as they're creating scale with their designs, that they're able to do more things in an automated fashion using, robots and more, standard automation that you haven't been able to see in construction because they haven't really had the scale. So I think I'm seeing it in factory, I'm seeing it on site, I'm seeing it with people, I think, and it's pretty much everywhere. But either way, that data of how things we want to build them needs to end up informing our choices and our design.
So I love that there's a massive continuum and there's like robotic nirvana at one end. And what we want to do is try and track back to some kind of small incremental change that is meaningful to the people who are our members. Our members are site managers, construction managers, project managers, design managers. So they're managing stuff, right? They've got to get the right thing in the right place at the right time. Now that word you said, exoskeleton, I think it would be really cool to understand, is there going to be like a low-tech version of that is going to essentially help save people's knees and backs and joints when they're on site all the time? What are you seeing in that exoskeleton space that might become wider distributed in terms of technology?
Well, I mean, let's think ergonomics and safety, right? So I think if you think of that at a very simple level, we're seeing that everywhere, right? We're recognizing that it's easier to work at bench height than it is to work at on top of a ladder. We're seeing that we want to have, people not lifting things, but being, assisted lifts and things like that. So I think at the very basic level, we understand that, we really do realize that there's technology out there for every level of your maturity. And I think that's what's important about our customers right now. And really the people around the world that are working is that not everybody is thinking about, having a digital factory at the moment. Some are just trying to move from being fabricators, to digitalize themselves, to get off paper and create a, connected data environment for themselves at a very base level. So I think that's the really interesting thing, that there is something for everyone at whatever maturity you are at in your current business state.
Yeah, nice. And I like that you talked about even raising to tabletop level, because even moving to a jig or any type of repetition in construction is a move down that tech continuum, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool. So tell us, in terms of industrialized, you said there's a lot of name overlap. You're choosing to use this industrialized term. Do you want to dig into the term thing, or is that a moot point?
No, I think it's fine. I mean, it happens to be in my title for now. So I think, it would be bad if I said we shouldn't use that terminology for a minute. But I think, again, like it's the overarching principle. Personally, modern methods of construction for me, the second I say, I'm 51, the second I say the word modern, it makes it feel old. You know what I mean? Like, and I think this is not about modern. This is about, about our expected experience with technology. And we rarely say the words modern in our normal lifestyle anymore. I think, look, offsite doesn't necessarily mean that it was fabricated. There's lots of on-site fabrication going on right now. And so I feel like that word is a little confusing. Mm-hmm. It's just letting you know where there's some fabrication done, not necessarily that it's fabrication. And I think, as far as the piece parts are concerned, it's everything from advanced building products that reduce drying time and curing time to single trade assemblies, multi-trade assemblies, all the way up through volumetric modules. I happened to be in New York City today, and we were talking about a very large job. Sometimes, volumetric modules are not the right assembly. It's more, do we have a kit of parts to serve a range of needs? There's not one that's better than another. And we have to kind of think separately from that. I think the part that most people miss in the industrialized construction world is this notion of technology enablers, right? So everything we do today is highly instrumented, where you almost, look, you can't go anywhere without anybody knowing where you are, just about on your person, in my wearable, in my car, in a tag when I'm at a conference. And I think we're not taking advantage of that in industrialized construction, where we actually have a physical piece part that we can actually move to the front of this process, attach things like IoT sensors to it, track it, understand its performance, know where it is at all times, and then really understand the performance of it once it's put in place. I mean, these are the kinds of things that industrialized construction makes happen, because it's almost like it's very hard to attach and put a productized workflow onto something that's very fluid. It's easy to attach it to a physical, a skid or a rack or a wall panel. A lot of people think when I say productization, I mean only the physical piece part. I actually always mean the digital workflow that you can then map out and automate and really optimize. And I think all of that is part of industrialized construction and means and methods of where we're going with and where people are already at in our current state and our near-term future state.
Exactly. So it's just purely getting more efficient by using the tools that are around us. It's just that some of these digital tools are not being used as much as they could. So when we were chatting just before, we talked about how we can track our pizza as it's delivered to us, but we don't have the same ability with our plasterboard or other products at the moment. So,
well, we choose not to, I would say, like I always say on my watch, I could order a pizza, I could customize it, I could pay for it with Venmo off my watch. I could see when it was going in the oven, when it came out. I can see the make and model of the car that's going to deliver it to me. It's probably background check the guy before he even picked it up. And on my Ring doorbell, I can see them, my digital doorbell, he can pull up and I know he's there. I see a picture of him. He matches the picture and the license plate. And I've already paid for it. So I can even tell him to leave it there if I want to with my voice on my watch and not even meet him at the door. But we think it's still okay to call somebody for a $200,000 piece of equipment that needs to show up that day. Like that just doesn't make any sense. It's our choice, the way we are integrating, applications that exist into our life and to our businesses these days. It's not like no one's ever invented it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. We just got a question pop up, which is someone asking about how to know about optimum levels of prefabrication or offsite. And of course, that's the whole moving from the smaller components and kit of parts up to panels and more complicated structures, volumes, complete. Can you talk to us about how you're seeing people work out what is the optimum size of that prefabricated part?
It's very funny. I was just actually with two very large American general contractors today in New York City. And first and foremost, 10 years ago when we met, Pam, I would show up and they wouldn't even know what pieces and parts are potentials, availability, right? Or what is even possible. Today, when I came, they already had a list of what they've seen out there and what they want and what they want to think about. But then the question became exactly this question today. What is really going to be feasible? What are the right, kits of parts that we want to utilize? And actually in this situation, we were talking about, and this is a very simple tool that you can use. This is basically, we talked about the impact each one of those piece parts would have and the level of difficulty. We charted the difficulty versus, impact that it would have. We broke it into 4 quadrants, basically. What was really tactical? What's something that was high difficulty, low impact that we're going to leave out there for now, unless we had a lot of time, and then all the way from strategic to the, which was, high impact, lower difficulty to the really high impact, high difficulty that would make transformational change. And so we could really take a simple map of what we thought based on the job that they have. It's going to be different for every job that you have. You don't want to ever ship expensive air very far. I always say that. But, we want to understand how much laydown space there is, the maturity of the supply chain you have. You want to understand what kind of transportation constraints, crane constraints, or availability of crane capacity that is available. There's a lot of very site-specific, program-specific understanding of which. And by the way, a lot of the companies that I work with now have preferred kits of parts with preferred suppliers that they want to understand, using those with other, locally available kits of parts. But I think if you just want to use that simple tool of difficulty and impact in 4 quadrants, that's always a good way to start the conversation. By the way, you know what I saw today? People's understanding of what one assembly was versus another person's understanding is also a good thing to do while you're doing that, so that you pull up a picture, you talk about what that assembly name actually means. And that way there was definitely some, conclusions that were drawn if we didn't have that weren't potentially correct. So that's a real easy trick to do.
Nice. So we're hearing that it's good to talk about being consistent, understanding what the pieces of parts are that are available. It's good to have a dream team, so to keep reusing those kits and parts that work. And the quadrant, I like that. It's basically how to weigh up the risks and the opportunities, right? So the risks are the constraints, you know, how big a piece can I get onto my site? Where can I lay it down? And then the opportunities, which is the impact, as you suggested. How much time can this save me? How much less noise can I inflict on my neighbors?
Right.
That kind of thing. Yeah, cool.
And think about it, Pam. It would be different. That impact is different if you're putting a new campus on an operating hospital versus, you know, a brand new build for an apartment complex. Those are two very different conversations for impact and difficulty, right? Even depending on, and that's why I say there's no right answer that I would say you always should use these things. Even on the same, let's say one healthcare job to another, it just really is highly dependent on lots of those things.
Yeah, nice. And I'm glad you brought up the healthcare thing, because we wanted to ask you a bit about the COVID context and what you're seeing in terms of how these approaches are being used for the construction of healthcare facilities. And we've seen some pieces in the media that you've been involved with, thought pieces, opinion pieces. Is there something that you want to speak into that space around, you know, the benefits of using these approaches, or the problems you're seeing in terms of people's understanding?
You know, when COVID first hit, I think I did an article in Forbes and we were talking about healthcare, and everyone sort of rushed to that as a solution, right? Like, we need hospitals, we need them right now. And I think you have to think of that, you know, even in, you know, industrialized construction, there's segmentation, right? So it's like there are immediate things like sprung structures that could go like instantaneously, or, you know, butler buildings, things that you could put up very quickly and you would take them down afterwards. And then there were things that were in stock that were temporary modular volumetric buildings that could be kitted out and retrofitted. Mostly we were talking about positive pressure on some of those units that could quickly be done. And at the same time, they were confusing that with sort of the more mid long-term type volumetric mods. And it kind of created some paralysis analysis. What do they say? Paralysis by analysis. So I think, you know, I personally thought that our own industry did ourselves a disservice for, you know, trying to sell the wrong thing at the wrong time, and really making sure that we could to roll things out as quickly as possible. And then, yes, address some of the bed shortages from a longer term perspective. And there was some education and segmentation that probably needed to happen. But I will also say that even when you look at things like a disaster relief and emergencies, and even the war that's going on right now on this planet, that those communities that invest in stock and in emergency disaster relief type buildings that can find a use for them when they're not needed, and be able to, like, you know, flow up and down with some needs and use them for the community if there's not an issue, and then roll them out for emergency. Those communities actually seem to be much more resilient. That if they figured out a way to invest and reuse and adapt, and then again, sort of, you know, the way you want that to happen, and not, it's almost like when there's an emergency, it's too late. By that point, you know, you should have planned for this. And I think, look, you're in New Zealand, my second hometown, like my second home country. We should be planning for some things over there that we are prepared for in New Zealand to make ourselves more resilient if something were to happen, God forbid, you know?
100%. And that's not just because we organised an earthquake on the day you spoke at the conference in New Zealand all those years ago. But
that is very true.
Yeah, that is very true. I think we're hearing about that tension between temporary and fast to assemble, right? Because just because something is constructed offsite doesn't mean it's temporary. Everything we're creating is long-term, permanent. So let's be really careful about how we're thinking about that use and reuse. In terms of use and reuse, I'm really interested in what you're seeing around the world in retrofit, in cladding, and how you're seeing pre-assembled cladding, wall panels used as we try and make our buildings more energy efficient. Is there anything you're seeing in that space that you can tell us about?
Tons and tons. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, we have to start understanding, you know, carbon life cycle. And so we're seeing communities and countries even make, you know, authorities having jurisdiction saying that you can't take down old buildings because, again, most of the carbon is going to be in the concrete and the steel. And so what happens when you want to strip a building because you have to use an existing building? You want to fit it out with, again, assemblies of kits of parts seems to be the easiest way at that point. I think we have to learn from that and realize that decoupling as we're designing things. Even during COVID, by the way, this is one of the conversations, as people wanted to use some of the prefabrication or they want to put up a permanent building. And you have to start thinking about the impact to our environment and to carbon and reuse of some of these kits of parts. If you only are focusing as, and again, I'm always an equal opportunity offender as a New Jersey, New Yorker, that if you just think about volumes of spaces when you're designing things, and then you're pouring in the most expensive element of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing into whatever parts that fit, it doesn't make it the easiest building to disassemble and reuse. There's design for manufacturing and assembly, understanding the make in the ease of manufacturing and assembly, but you also, there are different methodologies to that for ease of disassembly and reuse that aren't necessarily the same. And I think you have to recognize that that's a different methodology with different outcomes that you're looking for. And obviously, like at the end state, other things that we're working on and seeing at Autodesk are things like carbon calculators. We just worked with a company in Asia where they are understanding the physicality of each piece part in their factory, understanding the carbon, embodied carbon in those pieces, using generative design tools to pick the right combination of parts based on many different levers, based on circularity, based on carbon, based on reusability, based on cost and schedule, even putting together the right components into the right assembly, and then even taking that calculator to the trucks to understand the right way to pack them for efficiently pack and unpack them for the least amount of carbon. People are using generative design for those things today to understand predictive carbon analytics and using tools like EC3 and other databases that are out there in your geography to make sure they're assigning those values as in the data backbone of the piece parts.
Nice, because even though we're using words like industrialization or digital technology, we're simply talking about efficiency and productivity, right? And I think
Yeah.
an Australian guy at an international prefab conference a long time ago that said, we're about using the spanner, not the hammer, which speaks to that deconstruction space. A little bit lost on North American audience because it's a wrench, not a spanner.
Right.
But our audience here will understand it. And again, it's also using screws, not glues.
Right.
It's about how to have that circularity. There's a really interesting product out of Australia, New Zealand called X-Frame, which is a plywood created framing system, which again is totally about that circularity. So
you know what's going to help us the most, Pam, though, I got to say, there are great materials, great products, everything that's out there. Here's the fact. Somewhere between 30 and 40% of what you purchase for a construction site goes in the trash. End of story. So how do we avoid that? We have to think about how things need to be efficiently made before we are designing so that make information, that manufacturing information, whether it's a building product that's manufactured or an assembly that we need to productize and move to the front of this process, so that you're not just drawing spaces that we kind of figure out how we're going to manufacture them later. You have to flip it on its head. And that's how we're going to remove. We're going to have waste avoidance, less cutting, less, pipes going in the trash, less. 1/6 of what's in our landfills, I saw it last, was drywall. So I mean, plasterboard. So I mean, think about it. That is, of anything you can do, figuring out how to inform things with the way things are most efficiently made is going to do more than any one material product and anything that's out there.
I hear what you're saying, and I like that you're talking about how carbon calculators can also be those efficiency calculators, those cost calculators, because it's getting right into how products get to site. And this emphasis on making is really good because that's right critically in the middle of our membership. So we've got the site and construction managers coming out of the builder box, if you like, and then we've got the product managers, the design managers coming out of that consultancy box. And if we can just get everyone to understand the same language around making, which is don't design something without knowing how to make it, don't make something without understanding the design intention, right? If we can get that all married up, maybe that's where digital can help.
I absolutely 100% agree. I think, this terminology of design for manufacturing and assembly, we borrowed from manufacturing. I think it did us a big disservice. I think people heard the word design and they thought, oh, that's the architect's issue. If they would just embrace DFMA, we would all have, prefabrication everywhere on site. And I would think how do you think one human being could understand every potential piece part that could be made, multiplied by every proprietary product in the world, and understand the rules and constraints of the adjacencies? That's impossible for a human. So yeah, we actually are working with an amazing incubation that I was a part of until I moved over to my current group called Manufacturing Informed Design. That's a class of products, and our product is working with, in our incubation with tools like Inventor, which are mechanical CAD tools, defining those make rules and then allowing design tools like Revit to consume that data and not adjust it beyond its manufacturability. That 100% is how I believe. There are other great tools out there doing the same, like, that are in the market right now, but architects don't have what we have in my daily life. If I want to buy a pair of shoes right now, I'm going to go on a site, whatever one you want to call it, because I know you guys aren't big in Amazon sometimes down in Australia, New Zealand, but whatever, Alibaba, Ariba, whatever thing you want to go on. And I can look right at it and set my parameters for cost and delivery and pick something. Imagine you're an architect these days and you're in a tool and you can't really find that out. Somebody has to walk up to your office and use their mouth and their feet basically to tell you the right way to do something. So I 100% believe that our expected experience and our near-term experience should be, how do I create the choice and the understanding of those parameters, in the design tools while I'm there, and whatever it is I'm producing, that I can, publish up to a place that can be consumed.
So there's a couple of things that are coming out of that for me. One is the freak out that I can hear from everybody out there, because in construction at the moment, we have people to connect people, to connect.
Right.
To
Do we?
So we are a people relationship driven industry. So I guess the opportunity here is to release those people to do more constructive work. I mean, I'm not sure, how do you what's your response when someone's reaction is negative towards, I don't need that technology, we're all connected?
I don't know. I'm 51. I'm not going to be like working hopefully for that much longer, for not 20 years for sure. So I feel like, listen, at the end of the day, let's think about, like we talked about with my Apple Watch, like expected experience. You can say that we're a people and relationship business. We're a $14 trillion ecosystem on this planet. How long do you think it's going to take before somebody wants to, monetize and commercialize and digitize in a really big way that kind of ecosystem? We're not one industry. We're like, it takes 17 or 18 industries just to put a building together. You don't have to like tech, but at the end of the day, I don't know how many people are lining up to have your job behind you. That's the scarier part. We can say that, but we don't really have loads of people running to come and work for us. You know what I mean? So you better, I was telling you a story before we got on. I was talking to some old Boston guys that are like kind of old school like me. And I was talking about, how they shop for other things in life, right? And I explained them. I'm like, look, Amazon in 2019, I think, had almost 150,000 private label products under 45 different brands. And I'm like, they're not pipe spools, which are pretty common. These are things I put in my mouth and on my skin and on my hair, and in my baby, who's now 14, but in her mouth, on her skin and on her, like, they're much more special, some of those things that we're buying online, than, a pipe spool. So I think it's only a matter of time before, I was talking to these guys in Boston. He's like, yeah, how come, like, when they don't come on my website, like, there's not machine learning to ask a million questions, and then I'm feeding that bot with my domain expertise of the million questions I have to answer, but I'm only one guy. You know what I mean? Like, there's only one guy that can answer it in that company. Why are we not leveraging and taking his domain expertise and making an app or a bot that somebody can answer that, more easily when he decides not to work?
So that's an awesome point to touch on, because there are emerging technologies to capture that information. And one of the problems we have is this massive attraction, retention, skills crisis, right? We don't have enough people to do all the pipeline of work, even though some aspects of residential or smaller one-off projects might be softening in the next 12 or 18 months. We've still got a very strong commercial pipeline, a very strong local and central government pipeline. Tell us about how you think we should be capturing some of these kind of lifers, these members who have been in the industry for a really long time We want to really capture their expertise and funnel it into the younger people. I know when we were talking before, you mentioned TikTok. What is it that we can do in the chatbot TikTok space?
You know, it's funny. I was at a conference recently, and I asked everyone in the audience how many of their companies have a social media account that they allow people to, young people or anyone, to post on those accounts without going through some ungodly, you know, marketing, like 17 approvals. And not one leader raised their hand. There wasn't one company in the audience that actually allows that to happen. And I said, you know, we also can't find people here. And right now, I think the last time I looked on, I love TikTok because I have a 14-year-old, and I think I have, I don't know, 15,000 followers on there, which is nothing on TikTok. But there are 8 billion hashtags right now on TikTok with welding. 8 billion. 8 billion videos have been tagged with the hashtag welding right now.
Wow.
How many of you are looking for welders on TikTok? How many? By the way, my daughter, I played rugby. My daughter plays rugby. She is 14, and 2 girls on her high school team actually weld. I went to a rugby match. There were 4,000 high school girls and college players out there. Not one flag, not one banner for any construction company in New York across the river. Even like, and I have 2 girls on my high school team that weld in high school. So we're not going where the people are that we want in this population. We're not attracting them, and we're not, you know, marketing to them in the way they are. I mean, look, this will not be popular, and I've said it before in the United States. We've changed the names of our sports teams to be names that are more politically correct. Every union in the United States is called the Brotherhood of Iron Workers, Carpenters. Like, how many 15-year-old girls want to be in the Brotherhood, by the way? Just saying. It doesn't bother me personally, but I'm like, if you're trying to attract young women to these groups, asking my 14-year-old daughter if she wants to be in the Brotherhood of the something isn't really on the top of her list. You know what I mean? And she doesn't see anything in anything she looks on her phone. They don't have TVs anymore. So it's like, you know, I don't know if you have, I know you have a couple things like that in New Zealand, Pam, that I've seen as well.
Look, I think that's exactly like putting fellow at the pinnacle of any institute. And we see that with our own building institute, with the Institute of Directors. It's a framework that we've inherited, and we simply have to question about whether it's relevant to our young people coming up. And it's, you know, we're all about trying to find the under 35s. We're absolutely invested in being relevant into the future.
By the way, they're not even applying in our space. It's not about, everyone talks about, well, when we all retire, like, you know, if you follow another influencer named Gary V, who is not in our space, but he talks about the great not applying. You know, it's like, that's what's really happening. Young people aren't applying to any jobs, and definitely not ours, because, you know, especially because they can't even see themselves in some of their leadership, and they don't see you even wanting them in a lot of places. But people are, you know, they have choices right now, and the level of applications are just abysmal, you know, in lots of places.
I think that's a really good point. We've got similar issues in New Zealand, and one of the questions we've got is around how clients and specific projects can help bring new people on board. We've got some really interesting government-led broader outcomes around introducing apprentices on site, about having Māori-owned businesses, about having more women employed on site. But tell us a little bit about your view on how you're seeing clients shape the future. I'm aware that we've also got people from the Facilities Management Institute on this webinar, and we are in the midst of having like an arrangement, an MOU between the Institute of Building and the facilities managers, because we also understand that serial owners or surrogate owners and facilities managers have got a massive role to play going forward. So tell us about your experience.
They really do. I mean, look, the ownership on this planet for large scale buildings is aggregating, whether you're a government entity or, you know, you're one of the data center builders or the hospital, you know, customers or manufacturers of pharmaceuticals. There's not millions of them. You know what I mean? They're all aggregating into a small group of owners. And I've for years called them serial owners, because they have the same fingerprint every time they build a building. Operational consistency, flexibility, those things are more important to them. They don't make money on you building the building for them. They make money from what comes in and out of the building, whether that's capacity or healthy patients. or, cars or pharmaceuticals, whatever that is, that's their focus, not whether or not you paid $5 less for tile. You know what I mean? And I think we just haven't defined value enough with those customers to understand, what's more important to you at this. So what's happened, because we haven't done that, is that many of these serial owners have actually defined that for themselves. They are actually bypassing many of the tier 1 general contractors and going directly to the makers and asking them to, create products that used to be process or construction process. And they're spending time with those makers to define those kits of parts so that they can actually understand with certainty from their supply chain partners, like owner furnished equipment, we call it here, or free issue, sometimes people call it at the government level, what they're going to provide. And then what will be left to be designed is becoming less and less and less, not just because they want the certainty, but because they want to own the data around those physical piece parts to know how are they performing over 50 schools or 20 hospitals or 30 data centers. How is it that we can get information from those things we talked about before, like IoT sensors and digital twins one day, and what we're doing here, at Tandem? How do we get that information now so that we can make better predictive choices and more certainty from a facilities maintenance perspective to, reuse of these pieces and parts, to the end user's experience every time they go into these places? That's really what's driving this. Like, we have to kind of expand our conversations beyond the norm now. And I think that's what customers, and by the way, and I always know, Pam, you and I always have this thing, like, New Zealand's so much smaller. And I'm like, remember what I said on stage, I think 8 years ago? I'm like, you're New Zealand. You're the All Blacks and the Black Ferns. Like, you are the leaders in places like sport and technology. Like, it really doesn't matter. Like, you can bring this to New Zealand, and New Zealand can actually become an incubation hub for the world, because you have all the right ingredients for an innovation hub of, the right people, the right technology, the right reasons that this is so important to you.
You're 100% correct. What we lack in scale, we have in nimble and innovative attitudes and the ability to trial something before it goes to the world at scale. So yeah, you'd think we'd be doing a little bit more in that space. I think I'm just going to go quickly to the question that's sitting at the top of Slido at the moment, which is, so construction managers and design managers make up a huge part of our membership, right? So if we wanted to upskill them in just one area around digital, what do you think they should be focusing on?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the future of the construction manager is more to be like a systems integrator. You kind of have a choice. Most of my big general contractors have a choice at the moment. They're either going to become the makers partially. So in lots of countries, some of my general contractors now own factories. Mm-hmm. And I know that's happened in Australia and New Zealand as well. Some of them buy factories, some of them have set up big factories. They either have to become the maker, or they have to become the most advanced integrator of the available pieces and parts that are in your particular market. So I think understanding how to become a systems integrator and what that role really means, understanding that would be the first step to what I would say into the convergence of that role, the business model convergence.
Yeah, nice. And it goes to your point around clients and the value of data, right? Understanding the value of what we could be capturing and then how we're going to use that. And I think different companies have obviously got different levels of how they're doing that. I know we're doing that ourselves at the Institute of Building, our own little journey. I just want to jump into another couple of questions that I can see starting to pop up. I guess we're interested in how we might remove constraints to fully use some of these emerging digital technologies or any of the other broader industrialization technologies. And I'm thinking beyond cost, what is it about us that's holding this back when we can order and track a pizza online, but we're not applying that in our work environment? What is happening there?
Let's talk about the pizza for a minute. Like, in order to do that, they had to understand the process and the process development and product development of the pizza itself, and then process development of all the steps to break them down to get it from the order to my house, right? what we don't do is we're doing that every day. We just do it as if it's like a different one every single time we build a building, a different kind of pizza, a different kind of like route to some place, even though for the majority of things, they're actually very similar and could be the same. And so I would say what's stopping us is that we're actually not focused on productization of the physical piece part for reuse. And by the way, that doesn't mean that could be as a general contractor, you want to keep your own component catalog, understanding what suppliers make what pieces and parts and what's available, to understanding then what do you do with that from an industry workflow perspective when you want to conceptualize using it, track it all the way through, commissioning and digital twin. But then you want to, like, after you understand, like, what are the actual steps of delivering my pizza, you want to think, what's the right technology to actually do those things? Those are two separate conversations that you need to go through: product, the workflow, and then, the technology that would make it happen. I'm going to be honest, there's going to be gaps in the technology workflows of things that you own or don't know how to use, or maybe don't exist at the moment. But that's the really amazing opportunity that exists today. We have lots of customers, I think 150 to 200 a month, are building apps on the Autodesk platform services to fill that little gap in, to have the secret sauce to make something connect to some other workflow. And I think, but it all starts out with really product development and process development, and then understanding the technology that exists and technology that you need to find, or technology that you want to make. And I think, we, by the way, at Autodesk, I always say, Pam, I don't sell services or product, but there is an agnostic consulting group called Customer Success, Enterprise Customer Success, and Customer Success, that can actually build tools for you to fill those gaps and to help you map those workflows out that exist to be there to work with you, our customers.
Nice. I think what I'm hearing too is we just simply need to take more time after a project, when we're doing the lessons learned, when we're feeling so time bound, to really go back into the process and find the products or the processes that are repetitive, that go into our wheelhouse or our kit of parts that we pull out for each project. And there's potentially a really big piece of work that often gets overlooked because we're rushing headlong into the next project and the next project and the next project. Or there's a parallel group that's going through our business that is unwinding that innovation, right? It's kind of in that.
Yeah. It's like cleaning. It's like how you tell your daughters to clean their room, though. If you say, wait until it's really, really messy and then clean it up, it doesn't work as well if you say, as you're doing things, put that shirt away. And I will tell you, like, you get a much cleaner room as if you're, cleaning as you go, or I like to cook, so I like to clean as I'm cooking. I think we have to learn how to clean as we cook in our business so that we can capture this and then, in real time, capture the efficiencies.
I'm with you. We've had some really good chats about industrialized construction, the use of emergency buildings, emerging technologies, how clients are shaping the future. Can you now tell us, Amy, a little bit about this moniker, Queen of Prefab, and in particular, how it is manifest in this show that you're involved with that's had so many millions of hits? Tell us about that.
So, I mean, years and years, everyone's so funny. I don't know if it's because we're mostly, I won't make a gender like judgment, but like a lot of people that talk to me, they're always like, so why do you call yourself that? And I'm like, I actually didn't come up with the name myself. So it's like, it's not a self-given name. I just want everyone in the world to know it's not a self-given name. I like to call it my unicorn moment in my life where, I happened to be in Asia at the time, and I was contracted for a lot of money to go speak at a conference. And when I used to sign my name with just the A and marks. And this was before like social media, where I think people know what I look like and how I talk, and, that I have whatever things they like about me. But when I showed up, the gentleman running the conference said, where's your CEO? And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, when is he going to show up? And I was like, no, I'm the CEO that you hired. And he was like, oh. And so I think it was like too late at that point. And he walked out on stage, and like kind of in an embarrassed way, he said, and she's the queen of prefab. And I kind of laughed, and I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. And I thought, I'm going to like hashtag it, because I'm going to start using it like as on my thing. Cause I could either like be like, well, I'm embarrassed that he called me that, or I could own it and say, I'm going to own that. It's kind of a cool moniker. And so we did. And so I think, the little 4-series mini series that we have has almost, I don't know, I think over 9 million views now. I think our last episode had 3.6 million views. And that's good, because I feel like for the conversation we had before, one of the things we like to do in the series is highlight people that don't necessarily look like everybody else or talk like everybody else. And I think that's good. We have to showcase some of the great, amazing work that our ecosystem does. And we have to let people understand that lots of different kinds of people do lots of different jobs. And I hope that the series, has provided that. And we hope to do another series, episode coming up. And who knows in the world where that'll be. I think everyone knows my vote for where that might be. But, only if Portia Woodman will come and meet me at the conference, I think is like, that might be my holdback. I'm like a desperate Portia Woodman fanatic that, when I come there next, Pam, I'm gonna have to figure out how to. I've tagged her in some social media. She's actually answered me back a couple times as a lovely, lovely person, because we're big fans of hers.
I think you can leave that one with us. We'll do what we can to connect you with the Black Ferns when we see you next. I think this is a nice way to round out. We've been very privileged to spend the last 45 minutes with the Queen of Prefab. Of course, we want more time with you. So that's the invitation to everybody to come join us on the 23rd of the 3rd to 23 in Wellington at Digicom. I'm just going to click through to what we've just seen, which is, okay, so Digicom's coming up in March next year. We've just extended our early bird through to January the 27th. So there's still time to get the special rates before we go to full price. We have got our second Industry Insights coming up, and Amy, I know you know Daryl as well. Daryl Patterson has spent an incredible amount of time at Lendlease, Lendlease Digital in particular, and so he'll be talking around mass timber and some of the opportunities in construction over there. So look, that's us for now. And Amy, I just want to say a very special thank you. We look forward to seeing you in person in March next year. And thanks to everybody who's been part of this conversation. Please do join us and bring your questions coming forward to Digicom. And we'll see you at Industry Insights next time, 2nd of February. Ka kite.